Hello all and welcome to the very first module of this course. This module is an overview of the concepts of continuous integration and continuous delivery. We'll also be covering the basic concepts of DevOps in this module. As far as prerequisites goes, you should be familiar with the basic software development lifecycle in order to follow along. Just the basic stuff. You don't need to be an expert. Then we'll start by looking at a fictional e-commerce company, Mike's Electronics, and see how introducing continuous integration and continuous delivery brings in considerable improvements to their IT systems. These improvements include a shorter software development lifecycle, faster time to market, and increased business revenue. By the end of this module, you will understand the basic concepts of continuous integration, continuous delivery, and DevOps, and you will be ready to take on more advanced concepts coming up in the later modules. So let's get started and move on to the first session. Let's look at the pain points one by one. The first one is integrating the code. Merging the code from the source control branches onto the mainline branch and integrating it happens only once in an iteration. The integration team often sits in a room with at least one developer representing each of the module teams to figure out how to integrate the code into a single working unit. So the integration team has a huge task at hand. They consume a lot of effort and the process is very much error-prone as it is mostly a manual process. Let's look at problem number 2 now. We saw that the integration of code across modules happens towards the end of the iteration. This is the only time in the iteration where the teams get to see if their code works with the code of the other modules. If it doesn't, it can lead to a lot of rework. Also, because defects are detected late, developers have probably moved on to work on other functionalities and will have trouble recalling the minute details related to the defect. It will consume a lot of time and effort for them to go back to those pieces of code and debug. Trust me when I say most programmers have a very short-term memory when it comes to code that they wrote. Let's look at problem number 3 now. Even though merging to the main line will mostly happen only once in an iteration, there might be intermediate merges required across branches. This might be required as certain software components may have intermodule dependencies and developers might want to integrate some modules early on instead of waiting till the fag end of the iteration. Any such intermediate code merge could possibly introduce issues like compilation errors in the merged code. This can lead to broken builds. If any such issues crop up, all the developers involved can get held up until the issue gets resolved. This might take hours or even days, thereby leading to a lot of wasted person hours. Let's look at the next problem. If a developer introduces a functional defect into the code, there is a chance that it will sit there unnoticed for a long time. Functional defects do not necessarily introduce compilation errors, so they might not be uncovered until proper testing is done on the deployed application. The developer would have done his own unit testing, but there is a limit to what unit tests can catch. The developer's code, along with the code of all the other developers, has to be first merged, integrated, and compiled in order to get a stable build. Then the build package needs to be passed on to the operations team, which deploys it onto a test server. It is only at this point that the developer can see his code working in totality and probably notice the functional defect himself or get notified by the QA team. This is a really long feedback cycle. Ideally, the developer should be able to see his code in action as soon as possible. Long feedback cycles for developers are not advisable. Let's look at the last one, problem number 5. This one is more or less a cumulative effect of all the 4 problems. Because of the huge amount of time and effort involved in manually merging and integrating the code, and also because of late defect detection and long feedback cycles, a single iteration could typically take anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. In the digital era that we are in, this is a lot of time. If product management wants to roll out a minor feature into production, you cannot always ask them to wait for so long. When markets nowadays are getting disrupted in the blink of an eye, this long waiting period is totally unjustified. Let's summarize all the pain points now. Huge time and effort involved in manual integration, fixing issues at the end of iterations because of late detection, intermediate merge issues in the code often leading to broken builds, thereby holding up developers, long feedback cycle for defects, longer iterations leading to higher time to market for business. In the next session, let's try to bring in continuous integration into the picture and see if CI can help solve these pain points. So that's it for this session. I'll see you in the next one.